Hi everyone, welcome to Goodbye Deli. I'm Chris King, and today we will be reviewing Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Our first category is cinematography. Now, Matt Reeves is directing this film, and he hasn't had major experience with other feature films before, but if you've seen Cloverfield, which was produced by J.J. Abrams, you'll get a sense of what kind of scope this guy can bring to our kind of movies. So he has a different cinematographer along, but the main thing about Matt Reeves is that he has a really nice sense of scope and scale. If you've seen Cloverfield, you know what I'm talking about. The whole film is filmed with shaky cam, but if you ignore that, after the first couple 30 minutes, you'll get to see that he does love these wide angle shots and these really massive exterior shots that will set you in the mood, and you'll get to this massive feeling of isolation and desolation. So he brings that flavor right back into Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and I'm really, really glad that he is directing this film. So with the cinematography, a few key points to kind of notice is the color tone. The color tone of this movie is very opposite from Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Rise of the Planet of the Apes has a warm kind of color. So you see a lot of oranges, a lot of reds, a lot of yellows. This film is the complete opposite. A lot of green, a lot of blue, and that really conveys a sense of isolation. And it also conveys a sense of desolation and desperation. You get a lot of raining shots, a lot of dark shots. Not too many bright, beautiful kind of colored shots in the day or anything like that. It's much more a sense of he wants you to feel desolated and isolated. So we know that Planet of the Apes back in '86 took place on a different planet. So I guess what they wanted to bring to this kind of film is just creating that kind of sense of you're on an alien planet on Earth. So it's a really cool message that it sends through cinematography. And that was one of the highlights of this film. Our next category is screenplay. This has to be possibly my favorite part of this film. It's just such a beautiful kind of message, and really it just makes you think. If you want to see a movie that's just a popcorn eating kind of film, this is probably not the film for you. That being said, when you actually really get into this movie, it really makes you think about what it is that they're trying to say here. Because as you know, Planet of the Apes took place in '86. So it was a lot of that time where we were trying to remind ourselves that, hey, us in America or us in other countries as well, we've done some nasty things. A lot of that implication being war, and beyond that, civil war. We fought amongst ourselves, and we've discriminated, and we segregate, and we're prejudiced. So this kind of film just brings back that message into an era where we have a lot of younger people, a lot of teenagers, and even young adults who have forgotten that. So this film really does bring that into the forefront. Now, all this being said, the screenplay itself, the dialogue, isn't exactly highlighting these points. But if you really look into what's going on, it goes beyond the dialogue with the screenplay. Because the screenplay allows the viewers to understand where the story is progressing. And if you really pay attention, you'll see that this film is really an underlying layer of Julius Caesar. So now we know that the primary ape, the alpha male here, Caesar, is the leader of the apes in this civilization. But if you really just notice his name, if you've seen the first movie, you'll understand that his grandfather, you can say, he named him Caesar after Julius Caesar, a book that he was reading. That in itself was just a really nice message that lets you understand where this film is going to go along. So that being said, my only fault with screenplay is the fact that it's a very predictable kind of film. I found myself guessing what the next line would be, and often I was right. And that being said, it opens up many possibilities to saying where will Caesar end up? Where will his army end up? Those kind of messages. So it ends up being a little bit predictable, but even when it is, it's just absolutely fantastic. And the writers and director did an amazing job on the screenplay. Our next category is acting. Now, let me just start off by saying Andy Serkis steals the show. He absolutely steals the show. And obviously he is one of the main figures in this movie and gets possibly the highest amount of runtime with this film. But even with that, I mean, it's really easy for actors to just kind of lose themselves, and you just end up seeing, the name and not essentially the character. But let me just say, I mean, this guy is just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, motion capture is just a category of its own, and I know that we don't really acknowledge it with in the Academy. They don't really acknowledge it as far as winning nominations and awards. But this guy, I'm going to just say it right now, he deserves an Oscar. I mean, if not that, he deserves a nomination for sure. This film, I mean, and you'll know exactly what I talk about when you actually see the film yourself, but he really just kind of shows everyone, I mean, the motion capture is not just a different kind of portion like CGI. This is actually an art of its own. And take alone the fact that he's not portraying a CGI person. He's not portraying a animated version of himself. He's actually portraying a ape who is battling with himself, who obviously is conflicted from both the human and ape side. This is a really deep story. As I said, I mean, I'm gonna say it's loosely based on Julius Caesar. That is one my favorite Shakespearean play. I mean, that alone is just phenomenal what he does. He perfectly portrays the conflict of what a king or what of a ruler would feel when you're dealing with, you know, being conflicted by your people and the people you serve, and then being conflicted with an opposite enemy side. Like if you want to be really violent, you want to be extremely emotional, and that's what he brings to it. You can see it just alone in his eyes. Just the eyes alone, he really is able to convey the fact that, you know, you can sense what is it that he's thinking, what is it that he's feeling, and that maybe leads in a sense to the little problem I had with the predictability. I mean, you get to really see the emotion just pour out of this guy. It's actually really amazing. So that being said, he does an amazing job. Jason Clarke, again, I think he's an awesome actor. I really think that he is able to just kind of throw himself into these different kind of roles, and he really just kind of manipulates them and to kind of make them seem eerie, kind of creepy, kind of you know, desperate. He really is able to bring that out in a character. If you've seen Lawless, you know what I'm talking about as well. Then you have Gary Oldman, who is a different role for him. He plays much more, not exactly a villain, but an antagonist for sure. So he does an okay job. Nothing really stand out, but to me, honestly, I could just really focus on the apes the entire time. And I'm really looking forward to seeing it. Hopefully, if the future films will kind of focus a lot more on the apes, because we do have a lot of human conflict as well. That's really where the money is here. I mean, that just acting portrayals of everyone who did an ape job, I mean, just did a really, really standout job. So our next category is design. Now, the design has to be an okay aspect to this film. Something really, you know, amazing, and nothing really dreadful either. So it really looks a lot of like I Am Legend, kind of mixed with The Last of Us. That's kind of really what I was thinking of. So you really get this sense of, you know, 10 years in the future, everything is in ruins. But and there lies my problem. Because of the fact that with set design, you really want to convey the emotion, and in that sense, it really does convey a sense of desolation and isolation and post-apocalyptic almost. This is actually more mid-apocalyptic. But that being said, there's vines and everything is in ruins in 10 years. I kind of find that very, very hard to believe, unless there's a all-out war. And they didn't come out and just say that there was an all-out war. They just specifically tell you in the beginning of the movie that 10 years after, the simian flu has taken over and has wiped out a really massive portion of humanity, which I completely understand. But the way that this city looks like is like Last of Us territory. It looks like 50 years in the future, I would believe it. It's completely in ruins, and there's just vines and branches and growth everywhere. But 10 years, it's really kind of implausible that will happen exactly in this sense. But for that kind of sake, it does look beautiful. Does it completely make sense with just 10 years after the previous one? No, not exactly. With the Apes character design, I think it's an improvement on the first film, but there's a lot of senses where I just got really jarred, where a lot of these kind of, the apes just kind of standing really firm. It looks really cool, it conveys a really good sense of authority and power, but it doesn't exactly always fit well in certain scenarios. I think that the editors really have to make a little bit more of an eye for that when certain sets. If you're putting an ape inside a house, an ape on outside, there's different kind of configurations you need to deal with. So in that kind of sense, it becomes jarring in a certain sense, but it still looks really, really amazing. And obviously these apes, to me, is much more better than practical effects. I'm a big fan of practical effects, but in this sense, CGI is really king, and it just makes you much more emotional, much more emotionally invested with the apes and versus, humanity. Our last category is atmosphere versus mission. Now, this is usually the most important category regarding every single film that we review. So the atmosphere versus mission. As you know, the 86th Planet of the Apes was really just the start of a social commentary on what, us as Americans and really everyone around the world really just does to each other. The hostility that's always behind the human nature, especially when it comes to aspects such as racism, prejudice, and discrimination, even segregation, which is really, really important aspects to our past history, which is really unfortunate. So this really touches on that. My issue with it is that there's some unnecessary dialogue. For instance, really kind of typical trailer kind of feed, which is like Caesar saying, I'm surprised that we're just so much like them. You don't really have to come out and say it. I mean, just the emotion conveyed behind it. It's a lot better to allow your viewers to watch in and then just be able to see like, okay, wait, no, the issue here is that they're actually very alike. Not that they're different, but very alike. We can kind of pick that up by ourselves, especially, like I said, if you read Julius Caesar and if you actually studied anthropology. That's another aspect to this film. So in that sense, it's really kind of awesome how he's fused both social commentary and, these studies of our past, and be able to kind of fuse those and convey this really sense of, again, as I said, desolation and isolation and hostility. That's really the central key here. So that being said, it is absolutely better progress than the first film. The first film, which I thought was absolutely awesome, this film really expands on that, really opens up the scale, really opens up the possibilities for this franchise, and I absolutely love this film. This is absolutely the best film in the Planet of the Apes series, and if you're a fan of that series, I mean, you will love this movie. Now, it has deterred other people because it's a very different take than the original 86, but if you just remind yourself, they're going to build up. The next movie is going to be released in 2016. It's going to be tentatively called Planet of the Apes. So we're going to get back to that 86 era. For those of you who are a bigger fan of the older series, we'll get there. But I honestly believe that these two series, these two films being predecessors and being prequels in a sense, really adds to that kind of overall theme of just this hostility, growing hostility, and seeing the areas where we can build on that and kind of help each other out. Now, with all that being said, time for the score. As I said, I absolutely love this film. It is by far the most anticipated film I had for the entire year, besides Guardians of the Galaxy. These two just being really good areas where you can up the stakes in a bigger franchise. And Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, absolutely just wonderful film. As I said before, I think Andy Serkis deserves an Oscar nod, if not an award itself. The screenplay, as I said, just amazing film. With that being all said, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes gets a 5 out of 5. So that's our score for Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. As you can tell, I really enjoyed this film, and I really highly recommend, for those of you guys who can, go see it. And if you guys can see it in a bigger screen experience, such as something like IMAX or some of the bigger theaters who have much more bigger rooms, definitely go check it out. It is absolutely a beautiful film. And with that, you guys, just let us know your opinions, let us know your comments and suggestions down below when you guys get a chance to go see it. Make sure to subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel, Good Bad Deadly, and to follow us on Instagram and let us know how we're doing. Thanks.